Hello. We are going to be going through the section on variance and standard deviation in Unit 6, which is the statistics unit of our class. There is a lot of calculator work for this. Most of it can be done in the calculator. So I'm going to breeze through some stuff, and then when you get into class, you're actually going to put it into the calculator on your own. So, variance and standard deviation. There's another measure of dispersion. We were talking about mean deviation and range yesterday. The next thing is actually called variance. Now, variance, it sounds kind of confusing, but it's the average of the squares of the difference between the data and the mean. So just like we were subtracting them before, well, now we're going to square it before we add them all up, instead of just subtracting them and taking the absolute value. We're going to square them all now. There's two equations for this. The first one, let's use yellow here today. So the first equation is going to be for the population. And that is variance equals the sum from I equals 1 to n of parentheses xi minus x bar squared all over n. So it's kind of similar to yesterday's. And the one for the sample is going to be v equals the sum from I equals 1 to n of x sub I minus x bar squared all over n minus 1. Now there's something really nice about this. These formulas are kind of important. You need to know them. But I'll tell you the kind of neat thing in just a second here. So the square root of variance is called standard deviation. You might have heard this before. A lot of math questions ask about standard deviation because it's thought to be a really difficult topic, but with the technology available today, it's not as tough as it used to be. There are again two types of standard deviation. The population standard deviation is going to be this little O kind of thing, sub x, and the standard deviation is a capital S sub x. So population is the little crazy O, and sample is the S. That is going to be extremely important, knowing which of these goes with which. If you do not know which goes with which, you are going to get really confused really quickly. So that's something that you're going to need to study. So we're going to jump right into an example. The time in minutes required by each of 5 students to complete a test were as follows: 35, 27, 30, 25, and 38. Find the standard deviation to the nearest tenth. Really nice thing about this is that your calculator can do all of this work for you. So you're going to jump in and you're going to go into Stat, and you're going to go to Edit, which is number 1. And you're going to enter in all your data. Okay, once you have done that, you're going to push Stat. You're going to go over to Calc, and you're going to choose 1, which is 1 var stat. Okay? Now in that list, you'll notice among the other alien writing in there, you will actually see the population standard deviation, that OX. And you'll see that it equals 4.857983121, or about 4.9. Okay? So then, if we want to find the variance for this, the variance is that little O sub x squared, because variance is the square of standard deviation. So you can go and you can put in 4.857983121 squared, and it will give you something like 23.6. So So literally, you just take this entire thing right here and then put squared after it. Push the x squared button and square it, and you'll get that. There is another way to do it that's a little more accurate, and once in a while, um, this last place value here might be off by 1 if you do it by putting that in squared. The other way is that you can go into vars, which is another button on your calculator. You can push 5, which is stats, and then you can push 4, which is the little OX. Oops. And then you would have to square that. So then you would push the x squared button, and then you would hit enter. And it'll still give you the same thing. It'll still give you this 23.6 either way. For the second example, in the notes there, Honda is trying to determine the miles per gallon of the Honda Accord. 10 Honda Accords are randomly selected, and the miles per gallon are given below. So part A says find the mean. So to do this, you're going to go ahead and you're going to push stat, edit, and then put everything into L1 and L2 for this one because you have two different things. You have miles per gallon and frequency. And then you're going to push stat, calc, and you're going to push 1 var stat. And it will tell you that x bar, which is the mean, because that's what they asked for, they said find the mean, so x bar is 30 in this case. Really nice that when you go right into that, your standard deviation is right there also. But in this case, we want to use the SX. Okay, so the one above it, which here would be 5. Nope, looking at the wrong problem, sorry. Which here would be about 2.6. We'll talk in a second about why to use SX or why to use the OX, the population or the sample, in just a second. The variance for this is you would go ahead and put that whole thing into your calculator, and you would get that the variance, SX squared, equals about 6.9. And again, for this problem, to get the variance, you would push vars 4 to go to statistics. Sorry, I keep saying 4. That's the old calculator. Vars 5, and then this one would be 3 to get your SX. Now, you need to be able to tell when to use the population standard deviation and when to use the sample standard deviation. So I need you to write these down in your notes. So the first thing I want you to write down is that you use population when all of something are being used. I got to get rid of this message here. Use population when all of something are being used. So like in example 1, it was talking about 5 students. And you used all 5 students. Now, the sample standard deviation, which is SX, is when only some of the things are being used. So, like in example 2, they say they're talking about Honda Accords, and they pick just 10 Accords. They don't test all of them, they only pick a small sample, so they only use some of the vehicles, not all of them. So that's when you need to be able to figure out, when do I use population, when do I use sample. Unfortunately, if you pick the wrong one on the exam, it's going to be a conceptual error, because that's part of this concept, being able to decide whether it's a population, all of something, or it's a sample, just some of it. So when you come into class tomorrow, what I want you to do right off the bat is try plugging these numbers into your calculator and see if you can get to the same answers that I did. So see if you can get the same standard deviation, the same variance, the same mean, and all of that. So I hope you have a wonderful evening. I will see you tomorrow for class, and I know you'll be ready to go. Have a great night.